The other night I was in bed. I know I wasn't entirely asleep because I could hear the sounds of the house, and I was technically meditating. So my eyes were closed. I felt relaxed, focused on my breathing. I found myself suddenly opening my eyes. I'd been on my way to sleep, but now I was totally alert, my senses heightened for seemingly no reason. I felt a subtle movement in my legs, but that didn't immediately alert me since it's my dog's favorite place to sleep. I was wide awake now and sitting upright, and I witnessed a shadowy figure gracefully rise from the comfort of the end of my bed and silently walk away, making its way towards the exit of my room. With my dog nestled at the foot of my bed, I usually feel a sense of peace that envelops the room when I see this sight. This particular night, that familiar calm was accompanied by the shadow that emerged from where my dog lay. The feeling wasn't replaced by a negative one, but this time it was as if the very essence of the room had also taken form and manifested as this mysterious silhouette. I guess all this to say that the whole experience was really positive. Sure, at first it felt a bit eerie, and I didn't understand why I was awake, but the calmness was the same. There was still tranquility, and my current dog wasn't bothered by the experience at all. I couldn't help but wonder what the shadow's presence was as I laid there in bed. Was it something more than just peaceful? Was it familiar? Recently, I'd lost my grandma, and the night that I'd had this experience, I'd just celebrated 4 months clean and sober, which doesn't sound like a lot, I know, but it's the longest I've done in a long time, and I intend to take it one day at a time. Maybe it goes without saying for anyone who's done any sort of recovery work, but I've been doing a lot of praying, hoping that alcohol will never find its place in my life again. During this process, somehow I've felt that lately meditation, or at least just taking time to be mindful and express gratitude, even if it's just silently, I believe that we become attuned to even the subtlest energies that surround us, even those of our dearly departed. I have to wonder, was the shadow the spirit of my grandma, visiting from the realm beyond to offer solace and encouragement? Or perhaps it was the manifestation of another being altogether, drawn to the energy of transformation that's hopefully permeating my space. Regardless, the shadow left an impression on me. As I laid there, contemplating the significance of the encounter, I sort of felt a renewed purpose in my recovery. I truly hope to have similar experiences again in life, but I'm so curious how many others have had similar experiences to mine. In my mid-20s, I worked at a subacute rehab facility. Generally, these places exist to help those who are struggling after an accident or surgery, etc. Helps regain their mobility and quality of life with the help of physical therapy and around-the-clock nursing care. I worked in the dementia unit. These patients were long-term, and most ended up living out the rest of their lives there. Although it was called the dementia unit, our patients were comprised of those suffering from permanent or long-term brain-related conditions. These included dementia, Alzheimer's, comas, strokes, traumatic brain injuries, and brain tumors. These are the experiences I had while working there. 1. A disembodied hand. I had just clocked in for the evening, and I received a report from the day shift nurse. I was standing at the end of the hallway with my back against the wall, reviewing the notes that I'd taken from the previous nurse. Whilst reading over my slip of paper, I felt what could only be described as a hand dragging its fingers horizontally across my abdomen. I jerked back and looked around, but I was completely alone. 2. The Call Light Symphony. Although I don't have a particular story about the call lights, it was a normal occurrence to have call lights in empty rooms triggered. Even in rooms where the wires attached to the call button were unplugged from the wall, some nights the nurses would be forced to respond to several phantom calls for empty rooms. 3. The empty room ghost. At the very end of one of our halls contained a habitually empty room. The heat/air conditioning unit was broken, so patients were never placed there. The nurses and aides would use that room for privacy during personal phone calls, to poop in peace, or whatever else required some seclusion. One evening, I headed into that room's bathroom to touch up my makeup and fix my hair. I left the door slightly ajar while going about my business. I was putting my hair up in a bun when the bathroom door slammed shut behind me. Mid-heart attack, I spun around and jerked the door back open. The room was empty. The time it would have taken a human to exit the room would have been longer than what it took me to open the bathroom door. I'd also like to note that there was no furniture in the room, nothing a human could have hid behind. I'm convinced it wasn't a living person who slammed that door. 4. The last farewell. One patient we had residing in the long-term unit was a middle-aged woman with severe Down syndrome. She was mostly nonverbal, save for a couple of words she would utter randomly. She was very sweet and always had a smile on her face. It was my turn to help her eat dinner the night this story takes place. She didn't have the motor skills to eat properly, so I spoon-fed her while we caught up on some cartoons on her TV set. But this particular night, she acted completely out of character. I didn't notice at first because I was engrossed in the show we were watching. I failed to notice her attempts to get my attention. She finally resorted to using grunts to call me away from the TV screen. When I did finally notice, she seemed overjoyed with something. Her mouth was stretched into a wide grin, and she was pointing at an empty dark corner in the back of her room. I could clearly see the corner, but nothing else. I looked back and forth between her and the corner, but I couldn't understand what she was trying to communicate. She was pointing, giggling, and waving at apparently nothing in the corner. I tried asking her what she was trying to show me. Simple yes or no questions that she could nod and shake her head to. I became uneasy with her actions because I knew she was seeing something I could not. After I finished up feeding her, I walked back out into the hallway and was immediately approached by a fellow nurse. My stomach sank, and I felt queasy while she told me that the next-door neighbor of the woman I was just feeding had passed away during dinner time. 5. The window watcher. Not my story, this was told to me by a fellow nurse. My friend, let's call her Mary. She worked the night shift at the same rehab as I did, but this story takes place years before I was hired there. Mary was close to one of her patients, and she went out of her way to make her feel special. The patient was an elderly woman with no living family and was chronically lonely. Let's call the patient Emily. When Mary bonded with Emily, it became a habit of Emily's to wait by her room's window, which faced the employee parking lot. So when she saw Mary walking up to the building, she could wave. This became a special occasion for Emily, and the two would wave to one another before and after Mary's shift while she traveled to and from the employee parking lot. Then Emily fell ill and was unable to get out of bed for a while. Every time Mary pulled up for work, she would check to see if Emily was waiting by the window. When she didn't see her, she would know walking in that Emily was sick. This went on for a few weeks. Mary would pull into the parking lot, hoping to see her sweet patient up and out of bed, waiting patiently to wave at her. But then one day, Mary showed up at work and saw Emily standing at her window, peering out over the employee parking lot. Mary was thrilled and hopped out of her car and gave Emily a gleeful wave. But Emily stood motionless, didn't react to Mary's exuberant greeting. Puzzled, Mary headed into the building only to quickly find out Emily passed away earlier that day. I hope you enjoyed these stories as much as I enjoyed sharing them.